Okay, today we'll be talking about section 4.3 called the Middle and New Kingdoms. If you remember last section, we talked about the Old Kingdom. And remember, the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom are not actual places. They're just time periods in Egyptian history that historians have made. The big idea is that during the Middle and New Kingdoms, order and greatness were restored in Egypt. The main ideas of the Middle Kingdom was a period of stable government between periods of disorder. In the New Kingdom, Egyptian trade and military power reached their peak, but Egypt's greatness did not last. And work and daily life were different for each of Egypt's social classes. So that's the different social class is that pyramid that was in the last section. Remember, pharaohs were at the top, and then down the line goes craftspeople, nobles, craftspeople, and slaves at the bottom. So main idea one, the Middle Kingdom was a period of stable government between periods of disorder. Remember, stable government. If you have a stable government, it's good. It's stable. Things are going well for during that time period. So you had the Old Kingdom, and then you had a period of time that was not good in Egyptian history. Maybe some chaos, maybe wars and things that going on. Then you had the Middle Kingdom, and then there was another period of time in Egypt that wasn't good, and then the New Kingdom came. So the Middle Kingdom was following a period of competition for power between the nobles and the pharaohs. The Middle Kingdom began. So that was one of the problems right after the Old Kingdom, is that there was a period of time where the nobles and the pharaohs were fighting each other for power of Egypt. Egypt fell into disorder around 1750 BC. A group called the Hyksos invaded and ruled the region for 200 years. And then the Egyptians fought back, and Ahmose of Thebes declared himself king and drove the Hyksos out of Egypt, beginning the New Kingdom. Main idea two, in the New Kingdom, Egyptian trade and military power reached their peak, but Egypt's greatness did not last. So if Egyptian trade and military power reached their peak, that was when they were at their best, at the top, like a mountain peak is the very top. That was when they were at their best. Fearing future invasions, the Egyptians took control of all possible invasion routes into the kingdom. Egypt took over vast lands and was leading military power in the area. And Egypt became rich because of the lands it conquered. Remember, if they conquer a land, they go out and they take it over. Growth and the effects of trade. Conquests brought traders into contact with distant lands, and trade routes or paths followed by traders developed. We'll take a look at some of those trade routes in a minute on a map. Queen Hatshepsut encouraged trade and used the profits to support the arts and architecture. And then, led by Ramses the Great, Egypt fought invaders for many years, leaving their empire diminished. So we just mentioned Queen Hatshepsut. She ruled from 1472 to 1458 BC. Hatshepsut was married to the pharaoh Thutmose II, which was her half-brother. He died young, leaving the throne to Thutmose III, his son by another woman. Since Thutmose III was still very young, Hatshepsut took power. Many people did not think women should rule, but Hatshepsut dressed as a man and called herself king. After Hatshepsut died, her stepson took back power and destroyed all of the monuments Hatshepsut had built during her rule. So basically what happened is, while it sounds weird for her to marry her half-brother, you have to understand that back during this time, they were thought of as gods, and that gods needed to stay together and not, marry, mortal people. So that's why they did that with their brother, stepbrother, half-brother, those kinds of things. When Thutmose II died, his son was to take over, but he was young. He was very, very young. So she took control. And over time, once he got old enough, he wanted to become king, and she wouldn't relinquish the throne to him. So When she died, it was kind of a suspicious death. He then destroyed everything that she had done, temples that were made for her, statues. He basically tried to erase her from history because he was angry that she did not relinquish the throne to him. Let's take a look at the trade route map. I'll give you a better map here. Yours is sideways because that's the only way I could fit it for you to see. So you just have to turn your page sideways. So all where you see the purple is what Egypt was during the New Kingdom. And you'll see the outline here, all this purple. And you can see it's pretty much all along the Nile River. And then the red is trade routes. And these are all the different trade routes that they had. And you see them going up into Greece, Asia Minor, across the Mediterranean, and then all along Egypt and down even into ancient Kush, which we'll talk about later in this chapter. Some of the things that they traded were gold, copper, timber, and then an oasis in the desert. And remember, these are deserts, and this kind of protected the Nile River and ancient Egypt. Let's go back to the notes. So main idea 3, work and daily life were different for each of the Egypt's social classes. The complex society required people to take on many different kinds of jobs. So there were many different types of jobs in ancient Egypt. Family life was very important in Egyptian society, and most Egyptians lived in their own homes. Women had many legal rights, including owning property, making contracts, and divorcing their husbands, which is a little bit different than we've seen in some of these ancient civilizations. Here's a picture for daily life in Egypt. You see the servants worked for Egypt's rulers and nobles and did many jobs like preparing food. Most Egyptians spent their days in the fields plowing or otherwise working their crops. And this jar probably held a perfume, a valuable trade item. Egyptian jobs. Scribes, just like in Mesopotamia, Egypt had scribes that wrote in hieroglyphics. Few people were more respected than scribes. They did not have to pay taxes, and many became wealthy because it was a job that not everyone could do. You had to be pretty educated to be a scribe. Artisans, artists, and architects. These jobs required advanced skills and were also very admired in Egypt. Artisans are people who make, pottery and different things like that. Artists obviously create art, and then architects. Remember, architecture is the science of building. So architects designed and built different types of buildings. And you had merchants and traders. Although trade was important, few held these positions. Some had to travel very long distances to buy and sell goods. Additional Egyptian jobs. Soldiers. Egypt created a permanent army that had offered soldiers a chance to rise in social status and receive land as payment. So for being in the army, they could receive land as payment. Farmers and other peasants. This group made up the vast majority of the population. Remember, this is part of the group that is at the bottom of that social pyramid that we looked at in the last section. They grew crops to support their families and to pay taxes. And slaves. Slaves were usually criminals or prisoners. They had some legal rights, however. And that's it for section 4.3. So now you're going to go on and answer the questions on Schoology in the 4.3 folder. And remember to use this packet and your vocabulary list to help you answer those questions.